The first step is realizing that this is not your lot in life. You are the architect of your own future. I talk to so many people who just think if you've decided to run your own company, you're going to be overwhelmed and your family's going to resent you for the rest of your life. And it doesn't matter whether you're young or old, male or female, tall or short. That is a true statement. So please don't give up on the idea that you can run a great business and live a great life at the same time as step one. And then step two is find a system like EOS that helps you assemble the right leadership team, create the right set of priorities, get everybody on the same page with what you're trying to accomplish.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. I'm very, very excited to be joined today by Mike Paton. I'll be referring to him as both Mike and Paton because that's just how he rolls. Mike has spent a lifetime learning from entrepreneurs. Today, he's grateful for the opportunity to give back as an author, speaker, host of the EOS Leader Podcast, and an EOS Implementer. In the last 17 years, he's delivered over 150 keynote talks and workshops around the globe, conducted nearly 2,000 full-day EOS sessions with leadership teams of over 150 companies, authored 2 books, Get a Grip and Process, both in the Traction Library, and spent 5 years as EOS Worldwide's visionary. He now spends all his time helping entrepreneurs run better businesses and lives by mastering some of the simple concepts and practical tools he'll be sharing with us today. Mike Paton, welcome to the RevOps Champions podcast.
Thanks, Brendon. I appreciate you having me.
Mike, let's dive right in into a few of the simple EOS concepts that you're known to talk about. But right now, ones that you believe are still relevant or maybe more relevant right now as we're all focused on finishing 2025 strong and starting what's looking like is going to be a very exciting 2026 even stronger.
You bet. Well, I always like to start at a high level with the EOS for any viewers or listeners that aren't familiar with it. It's an operating system for an entrepreneurial company. EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And so it's just a set of simple concepts, practical tools, things that have been around for thousands of years, going to be around for thousands of longer years. What Gino Wickman, the creator of EOS, discovered a long time ago is when a leadership team or a business is struggling, it's usually struggling due to weakness in one or more of 6 key components that we believe all businesses have and need to strengthen. And those components are the vision component, the people component, the process, the data component, the issues component, the process or process component, depending on what part of the globe you're from. I noticed you've Americanized your pronunciation of that word, and I appreciate it because it always trips me up. And the traction component, the ability to bring a vision down to the ground and execute on that vision. And I think the vision and traction components are the things that in times of risk and uncertainty, we end up talking the most about because, what becomes more difficult when there's a lot of unpredictability in the world, which there seems to be right now, is making decisions using the model you were using when things were more predictable and you had more confidence becomes harder. And what we've learned as EOS implementers over the years, I started in 2007 before the financial meltdown. And so have been through COVID, and now we're going through another tumultuous period. And so what we've found really helps is when the vision for an organization is clearly defined in the cultural norms, its core values, its core focus, what the people in that organization were put on the planet to do well, and what it stands for as an organization. When those things are crystal clear and you can rely on them as the basis for making decisions, it just becomes an anchor or a rock and a calm place to dock your boat in a storm. And you find the right answer to a lot of the tough questions that we're struggling with, and you're able to make decisions knowing full well they may be the wrong decisions, but you're relying on things you decided when it wasn't a period of crisis or uncertainty.
I really like the way you anchored that because so in our day to day at Dynamico in the work that we do, and yeah, on this RevOps Champions podcast, we talk a lot about the for us the four pillars of revenue operations are people, process, data, and technology. So you might recognize the first three, and it was a great reminder when you were sort of talking about the six components of EOS with, starting with vision and ending with traction. And we focus heavily on the people, process, and data components in between. And it often throws businesses off when they come to us because they typically coming to us to set up a new CRM or to make some changes or updates to their CRM, and which is so they're coming to us for the technology component, and we're like, great, let's see how we can figure this out. Do you all feel good and aligned with as far as your people are concerned? Then we move on to the processes, like. And we're typically talking more with customer facing teams. So your marketing process, your sales process, your customer service process, and then and then we talk about the data that across each of those and how that feeds up to the mothership. Like what are the scorecard metrics, or in this case, the data that you're tracking that each of these teams are accountable for. And it often throws a lot of people off. It's like, well, why do you need to know all that when we just want a CRM?
Yeah.
So I'd love to get your sort of take on this because, I mean, you've done this many, many times. You've been in this room 2,000 times with over 150 clients. And I know systems often become an issue. And so when you're discussing issues, systems are, and of course, and I think this is part of this tumultuous time.
Often they're getting blamed for problems caused by other things too. Or they're looked to as the solution to a problem that really isn't solvable by the system.
Correct.
That's for sure true.
And again, as we've learned, and we were there. So when we started using EOS in 2014, thanks to you, and an event that was put on by Bridgewater Bank, who happens to be our bank at the Marriott Southwest, and
yep. One of the original traction days in Minnesota. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you were awesome, and I guess awesome enough to get us hooked.
That's good to hear.
But since then, whenever we've learned, but for those, to your point, those who aren't quite as familiar, I would say probably 3/4 of the people that we work with do run on EOS. But for those who are less familiar, whenever you were just alluding to the issues or the problems that come up. And one of the first lessons we learned, especially if we're working with an implementer, which I highly recommend, is okay, is this a process issue? Start with the process. Is there something wrong with the process?
Or a people issue or a lack of data issues. Sometimes, the sales funnel and the sales out function is full of so many potential root causes. It's not even funny. Right.
Right.
And, that was the part of the world I grew up in. In fact, little known fact here, I was running sales and marketing for a sales and service training company in Columbus, Ohio, when Salesforce.com first started marketing itself. And I'm calling it Salesforce.com because that's what they called themselves back in the day.
Right.
This is so long ago that their logo was actually the word software with the Ghostbusters symbol over the top of it. That's how old I am. Just so everybody's clear.
Right.
And so, I actually think the vision component is critically important to a successful sales function. Like who are we as an organization at the core, and what do we love to do and are best at, and who's our target market client? Like what kind of organization or person is a perfect fit for the value proposition we've cobbled together in this organization? When I talk about those things being an anchor to the way you make decisions and implement software and change processes, I think it's critically important to have the context provided by the vision component to do your best work. If people don't know why you're supposed to hand deliver a proposal to your client a couple of days before the RFP deadline, if they don't understand the context for that, then they're sitting there thinking, well, everybody else is emailing it at the last minute. Why don't I do that? That's not fair. Right. So all of these, one of the things that your viewers and listeners need to hear me say is that you can't run a great organization by focusing your efforts on one or two or even five of those six key components. They're all interdependent. They all work together in harmony.
Right.
to strengthen the way your business is able to consistently execute. And systems is in those 6 key components. I suppose if there were 7 components, technology might be the 7th component, or systems or
Some
infrastructure or whatever you
right.
want to call it. But certainly you can't have data, and most companies today can't have process without great infrastructure and technology. So
Mm.
yeah, it's just a fascinating subject, and one, you know, quite frankly, I could talk about for hours, but I know your viewers won't tolerate that. So let's get back to it.
No, I do. I mean, I think it's really critical, but I think before we continue, I have a confession to make,
Yeah.
which is I was not interested in process for far too long. And I wish I'd seen the power of it far earlier in my entrepreneurial journey. I have since figured it out, but like I said, I just wish I had understood it and adopted it earlier in my journey. You probably wrote this book for
I
people
wrote
like
the
me.
book for the same reason, Brendan. I discovered that part of the reason my clients were struggling with process is I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about teaching it either. I'm a visionary entrepreneur, and I believe you hire great people and let them figure out how to do it. Why do I need all that stuff? And you know what you miss is that an 8-person organization is different than an 80-person organization. And if you really want to grow and scale your business, you need to invest in the kind of infrastructure that allows multiple layers of people to do a great job of onboarding and training their folks. And if you are the linchpin as the founder of your organization to all of that, one of the people we quote in the book, a visionary entrepreneur from Houston, Texas, is the author of the quotation. Yeah, when we first started implementing EOS, it did feel a little bit like we were being hit with the process stick, which is
Yes.
one of my favorite statements ever. But his aha was he realized once they started doing process work that they had fixed this problem. And he described our process for everything in our business before we started implementing EOS looked sort of like this. Step 1, ask me what to do. Step 2, go do it. Step 3, ask me what to do next. Step
Yes.
4, go do it. Step 5, go ask me what to do. And he said, I had to get out of that linchpin role because I was the bottleneck for everything.
Right.
So that's what strengthening the process component is all about, is getting the most experienced person or people at your organization out of the middle of all the day-to-day repetitive, workflows, so that your leadership team and your managers can elevate themselves into more critical problem solving and strategic thinking and creativity and innovation and all that stuff you pay mid-level managers and leaders to go do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have no idea what you're talking about because I've never felt that.
Tell your team members, email, text, or call me and let me know that that's a poppycock, by the way.
This is why I love having these conversations because we're all here to learn and learn together.
Of course.
So, Mike, so maybe let's go back to in your time as the visionary at EOS Worldwide, and since then, what did you see, and what are you seeing as the biggest challenges entrepreneurs are facing right now in scaling and growing?
Yeah. So, I would put people as always my top answer to that question, right?
Mhm.
It's just Gino Wickman used to say, when businesses are owned and staffed by robots, we're out of business, guys. It's just really hard to find and keep great talent. And so, that's when we do surveys of the EOS ecosystem and we ask people what the most pressing challenge they're facing, is almost always people. Um, Matching the pace of internal growth to external growth would be my number 2 answer. And there's so many layers to that answer that it's probably numbers 2 through 10. We have invested in all this infrastructure and these systems and these people and these facilities to fuel growth, but we're not capturing the market share that we need to make those investments pay dividends. And sometimes it's the other problem. Our sales team and marketing team are killing it, but we can't keep up with the volume. And so we're losing customers out the back door, and our sales team's just having to run on a
See,
treadmill to sell enough.
once again, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. So that's probably problem number 2. And then
Okay.
I think the other thing is the knowledge that what got you here can't get you, that isn't going to get you there. Like I think there's a premium placed on loyalty to today's superstars that hamstrings aggressively growing and scaling businesses. Where, I wish the leaders and managers of a company that's grown from 10 to 50 or 75 or 100 people, I wish more of the folks in the leadership team conversation would be more comfortable raising their hand and say, listen, I'm out over my skis here. Okay. You
Uh,
keep asking me a bunch of perfectly reasonable questions about what we should do to grow from 15 salespeople to 75 salespeople. And the honest answer to your question is, I have no earthly idea. And,
uh,
sometimes I'm in a session room with people, they've been growing so quickly and they're, fabulous people. They're hardworking, they're smart, they've learned a lot along the way, but it's clear they're just running out of steam.
right, right.
And so that's, I think, another common problem that may sound familiar to the people who are watching or listening.
Yeah, definitely. And it actually reminds me of, Gino shared something a few days ago, which was an excerpt from a presentation that he did at an EO event recently, where he actually called you out when he asked you a question. What was the one thing that I did right, or something to that effect? And you just told him straight out the whole piece was around how critical it is to be open and honest, and starting with yourself as the leader. Because as you were explaining those three big issues that you keep coming across, it reminded me that is probably where the solution starts. It's sitting down with the team as it's evolving from 10 or 15 to 75 to 80 to 100 to 250, whatever it is, and saying, guys, like, I'm over my skis. I'm sorry, or I messed up, or how do we figure this out? And again, are we being honest with each other about what we can do and what we should do?
That's right. That's right. And it, again, it starts with the ability to look in the mirror and, it helps when you have a stable family life. And, when I was running EOS worldwide and starting to feel like maybe I wasn't the right person for that job, I teach this stuff for a living. And it took my wife sitting me down and saying, you appear to be miserable right now.
Uh,
You're not happy. You're working around the clock. You keep saying things are going to get better after this, that, or the other thing, and they're not. And so, I mean, it's a tough thing to do when you're passionate about the organization that you're a leader of or a manager at, and you believe in your own ability to continue developing. It is hard to raise your hand and say, hey, I might be the issue here. I might be the issue here.
mhm.
And, part of life's journey is learning how to do that.
Yeah. So, and in those three issues that you talked about, I mean, Mark O'Donnell wrote the book around people. I mean, that's probably a good place to start, right? If you're interested in trying to figure out the people component.
It's a great place to start. And Mark was the person that Kelly Knight, the current integrator, my integrator at the time, and I tapped to be the next generation visionary. And Mark is just a much better fit for this last 5 years worth of growth and innovation and change in the organization than I ever would have been. He was also willing to step away from his EOS implementer practice and be a full-time visionary for the organization, which is something else I thought the company needed. And I
Right.
wasn't willing to do that. I love being in the session room with my clients. I actually think I'm way better at that than I was at being the visionary for EOS worldwide. And so, at some point you just have to have that reckoning with yourself and do a,
Uh-huh.
a solid inventory of what's working and not working, and pick the
Right.
right path for your organization without dismissing what's best for the organization and your family and all the other stakeholders involved.
Well, and not to mention yourself.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Correct. I'm a happy, content person doing what I'm doing now, and I'm a big fan of the leadership team at EOS Worldwide and rooting for our organization and our community to continue growing and thriving. But I much prefer doing it as a professional EOS implementer than I would enjoy it trying to run the show, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of this sort of, we all want a bigger and better future, but it's different for each of us, right? I mean, your definition of success is different to mine, and what
That's
that ideal big future looks like is going to be different for me than it might be for you, right?
Yeah, and I want to come back to this open and honest thing for a second. I need to say this out loud. Nobody shows up to a conversation with a colleague or a direct report or a supervisor, manager, leader wanting to not say what's on their mind. Okay. Nobody has the intention to not tell the truth or not be fully transparent. Like I rarely see that. Every once in a while, there's a sociopath on a leadership team somewhere, but it's the rare exception. The truth of the matter is we mistake kindness with meanness, right? Like with avoiding meanness. Okay. We view constructive feedback and honest communication as somehow not nice or not kind.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this comes from a great place. We care deeply. We care deeply about the people around us. And if you've grown an entrepreneurial company, I mean, it is like every bad movie about entrepreneurship ever. Like it's a war room environment and people are super committed, and rarely are folks working 40 hours and going home and living a full life outside the business and so on and so forth. And so you get really, really close and really, really connected. And the idea of letting one another down or making someone feel badly because you're observing that they're struggling in something feels like you're doing something wrong. And
Yeah.
that's where the motivation to not be fully open and honest is. And the switch I'm trying to flip when I'm helping leadership teams process through this inevitable human condition is, if I want to be a superstar in my organization and you're not honest with me about the gaps between what the company needs and where I'm performing, there is no way I'm capable of becoming a superstar. So step one of me knowing I've got a ladder to climb is you helping me locate the ladder. And that's the motivation I want people to employ when they're being brutally open and honest with one another, not because they don't care, but precisely because they do care.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of what you just said, sounds very similar to, Kim Scott's, sort of radical candor.
100%.
Yeah.
Huge
Yeah.
fan of radical candor. It's
Right.
exactly the right tenor of demonstrate that you genuinely care, and B, brutal openness and honesty, and an even measure of praise and constructive feedback, right? Like,
Yes.
again, the easy people issues to resolve are the ones where somebody doesn't share the company's core values or fit its culture and aren't great at their job. Those are not things most leaders lay in bed awake at night worrying about. It's when one of the things is true, but the other one isn't. Those are the conversations we're avoiding. And that's where you got to lean into the radical candor for sure.
Right. Right. And I guess, from a leadership perspective, which of course fits squarely into the people component, that starts with how you recruit, hire, that the team and set the rules in the beginning, right?
Right.
Again, another lesson I guess I'm still learning, but it definitely, I wish I'd learned earlier.
Well, this was a conversation I had with my client yesterday who's been running on EOS for a long time, was about not starting to use the core values and the people analyzer and a tool we teach called GWC for gets it, wants it, capacity to do it. Not starting to use that a year into somebody's tenure at your organization. How about if we hire with those tools? How about if we're clear up front that our expectations are you got to consistently exhibit these 3 to 7 core values, and you got to be good at these 5 roles in your seat, and we're going to evaluate you on this criteria. And if you feel comfortable that those 2 things are going to be true, and we feel comfortable those 2 things are going to be true, we're probably going to extend an offer. And if you feel you can meet those expectations, please accept the offer. But if not, don't. And what I've seen with my clients, they're really good at that up front, is like a week in to a brand new person starting at the organization. If you've had that very forthright conversation and you notice gaps between what you'd hope for from somebody new and the way they're performing, you'll have a comfortable conversation right away. But if you weren't that clear, you have a tendency to watch and wonder, and maybe you take notes and populate their file and you're saving up commentary for their first performance review.
Yeah.
And then by then the problem is festered and it doesn't. And so one of the things we preach is just early and often positive and constructive feedback, please.
Yeah. Yeah. Which of course is one of the reasons, from our revenue operations perspective, it's people, process, data, technology,
Yep.
because there's very little we can do to impact the people component, which includes for us, the way we talk about it is vision and leadership and, good, recruiting and hiring and onboarding practices and all that kind of stuff. Like I said, when our clients are on EOS and they're using all the tools you just mentioned, then it definitely is easier. But again, we're seeing we're often seeing these issues in real time, and a lot of them we cannot help them with, which is
Right.
frustrating, but it is what it is.
That's right.
So, Mike, I mean, the 2080 approach to process. I mean, I don't. Do you ever get sick about talking about that?
No,
Okay.
not anymore.
So for the folks listening who might not be familiar, because I mean, we're talking a little about process now. This was like a big breakthrough for me, was the 2080 process. Why don't you explain it for us?
Yeah. So, this comes from self-examination and self-medication, to be perfectly candid with you. Once I realized that I was not enthusiastic about teaching process and my clients weren't enthusiastic about learning process, I did a lot of research to try and get to the root of why that was. And one of the things I discovered is that if I could get my clients to talk about process at all, their immediate manifestation of process improvement work was, oh my God, I need a 700-page SOP manual, and I'm going to create this rigid compliance culture where nobody's allowed to think for themselves or ever diverge from the process, even when it makes sense. And I don't want to run my company that way. I started my company to be free, right? And so that's what motivated this entire book, was helping people understand that there are a lot of misnomers in that viewpoint around process work. And that, what we're focused on is helping people take a high level 2080 approach to process work. In some cases, it's just to get started. Okay. In other cases, I've got clients who have just done the 2080 work. They do 20% of the work. They get 80% of the results that you would get from a process documentation, simplification, and maybe improvement initiative. And that's all they need. And they're happy as clams and they don't have to do anything more. In other situations, I have clients start with a 2080 approach and then add more detail and rigor and discipline as they go forward. But the 2080 approach just says, let's only document processes that are dyed in the wool, need to happen every day, should be done this way every time. We don't need people making up their own way of making a bed in a hotel if we own a hotel company. Okay. There should be a process that's efficient, effective, and produces a consistent result, whether you're in Punxsutawney or Toronto. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So let's only document those processes. And then instead of documenting 100% of the steps in 100% of our processes to get 100% of compliance, what if we only documented the major steps, the 5 to 7 things that we want our people to do the right and best way every time, not the 57 things that need to be done this way. And so that's what we mean by 2080. Is an analogy I'll give, and it's perfect because you and I are talking during the initial stages of the Major League Baseball playoffs. What we do is we teach every employee at the organization to play T-ball first. How do you hold the bat? Where do you put your feet? What are the fundamentals of a decent swing through a baseball? Where do you run once you've made contact with the baseball? That's the 2080 approach. Now, someday you might be teaching your best salesperson how to hit a split finger fastball on a 3-2 count in the bottom of the ninth, and that's going to win you the playoffs. But let's start by teaching everybody on our team how to play T-ball, so you as a manager or leader don't ever have to explain to anybody on your team how to do whatever the functional equivalent of holding a baseball bat is in your company. That's what 2080 means.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. I mean, in your own words, because I think it's such a powerful system that I know worked really well for us, and it was really what got me sort of sold on the idea of, because I was caught in that thing of like, well, processes. I mean, that's going to be pages and pages of 57 steps. And how are people going to remember those 57 steps, which is part of the power of simplifying to the 2080, which is just, they people can think about the 5 to 7 things they need to do, but if it's
Yeah.
more than that, then you're going to start complicating their lives.
Well, I'll give you a real world example, and it kind of crystallized for me. This just happened in the last 24 hours, crystallized for me what we were hoping to accomplish with the book process. So we have a couple of light fixtures in our master bathroom in our home, and one of them went out, and my wife called the place and they sent a new light fixture, and then the other one went out. She called the place and they sent another new light fixture, and we're waiting for this to come, thinking, I'm going to call an electrician. And she looked at me and she said, do you think we could, try and repair these light fixtures ourselves? And my first reaction was, oh, it's electrician stuff, like I'm going to electrocute myself and burn the house down. No.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I said, just a second. And I went to my phone and I Googled, how do you replace a light fixture? And a video came up that was like 4 minutes long. And there are like 5 steps: turn off the power, test to make sure there's no power to the wire, do this, do that, hook these wires up, screw those things on, put the thing back, boom. And I'm like, shoot, I can do that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, now, if you have any electricians listening, I'm sorry, I won't be calling you. And hopefully I don't die shortly after this record.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Good.
But
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to do, is just help people understand, hey, this might be a little easier than you think it is. And you're going to save a lot of time and money, and it's going to create scalability and consistency in your business. Why don't you give it a try? That's what we hope for when people read the book process.
Yeah. Which, as I think about all the time that we spend with our implementer, also reminds me of the people component. That's part of leadership, is we have to simplify the systems for our employees
That's
for
right.
them to be successful.
Right.
And then I think probably the data component as well, and then kind of show them in numbers what success looks like for their particular role.
That's right. And since you're familiar with the book, we make a very strong case that the process and data components are inextricably linked. You can't be strong in the data component if you're not strong in the process component, because you may not be measuring the right activities to get the results you want.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, I love that. I'm gonna use that, Mike. So, in fact, everything has kind of led me to this moment. I cannot help speculating what your next book might be. Any chance you wanna share what you're working on?
Yeah, actually, I've got a couple of thoughts. I'm formulating some outlines around the topic of alignment and why it's so valuable and so rare from a business book standpoint. And then another dirty little secret, God, you've gotten me to be, this is like a true confessions conversation. I'm also a huge fan of fiction. And
Okay.
so I've got a couple of fiction series that I've started outlining, and
Oh, interesting.
I like the creative process, and I loved writing Get a Grip, because creating characters and weaving characters in and out of drama to a conclusion is kind of a fun experiment. So those are the 2 things on my plate. But to be honest with you, those are sidelights to what I love doing every day, which is helping entrepreneurs get what they want from their businesses. I just love my life as an EOS implementer. I'm in the middle of probably the fullest year of session work and talks and workshops that I've had in the 17 years I've been doing this.
That's awesome.
I
Congratulations.
I will slow down someday, but when you love the work you do and you love the people you get to do it with, it's just really fun to get up every day and have at it.
Yeah, well, because you wouldn't be the first person to say that it doesn't really feel like work, right? Because
Correct.
you're just doing what you love to do.
Correct. But if you see our friends at Bridgewater Bank, please tell them when I'm in the room with them, it does feel like work. I'm already getting enough flack from them about what I get paid. So it's just got to feel like work.
Okay, I'll send Jerry a text and yeah.
Cool.
Mike, so the reason I was asking, I was been wondering about this because you ended the previous question by ending up with the correlation between process and data,
Mm-hmm.
which again, like I said, we see every day, and we cannot do our job from a systems perspective without alignment in process and data. But there's something else going on right now, which I know you're aware of, and we're acutely aware of, which is how processes and data are going to be impacted in a way we've never thought about. And maybe even Gino didn't think about this from the beginning either, of how because we're already doing it in our own business, and we're starting to advise our clients on how to incorporate AI agents and assistants into their processes, which
Yeah.
of course then also impact their data. And there are already some interesting things floating around the ether on how do you manage. So we know we're talking about managing people who run the processes, but who knows how to manage agents? AI agents.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of discovery happening. I mean, even the smartest, most cutting edge people developing the tools, my sense is, are learning surprising lessons along the way, which is what's so fun and exciting about innovation.
Right.
Maybe a little scary to people who aren't in the thick of it. I've already seen you can use an AI chatbot to create a draft process for you, and then you have to go personalize it, right? Like,
Absolutely. Yep.
you know, you need to understand none of you started your businesses to be generic providers of an average service. So when you ask technology to mine all the data and content that exists out there and come up with a process for, making an ice cream cone when there's a customer standing in front of you at that counter with 30 flavors of ice cream in it, it's going to be a generic average process. And so if you want to run a great business, you can start there. But step two is, how do we make it rich and full and better and uniquely ours?
Yeah.
And so hopefully, Gino, for years, long before AI was anything more than a scientific fantasy, Gino would always say, hey, technology is an accelerant, not the be all end all.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Absolutely.
you've got to be clear on what technology is an accelerant of,
Yep.
and make sure you're harnessing it for that outcome rather than just letting the technology do the work itself is kind of the way
Absolutely.
I'm approaching it. And again, I'm also prepared to be wrong about that because I'm by no means an expert on the subject.
No, I mean, and I think that's spot on. And I think we've had many other smart people in addition to yourself on this show, and who, again, have run and scaled very successful businesses or departments within companies. One of the, I guess, most common pieces of advice that they give is, because again, we're trying to figure out how do you match your processes and your data to the technology that we're trying to implement and create a
Hmm.
system for you that just happens to be your revenue engine. But they all say the same thing, which is, if you cannot map your processes manually, like on a whiteboard or whatever you use, and understand what needs to happen from one process and the handoff to the next process, et cetera, and then what the data is that is the outcome of that process, if
Right.
there is one, then don't even be thinking about technology. But of course, shiny object syndrome, again, another thing that I have, is a real thing. And I think you mentioned this very early on, is that, a lot of businesses go in thinking that if they buy the software, that it's going to solve their process and data issues.
Correct.
But in fact, it accelerates chaos instead of accelerating
Correct.
something
Well,
good.
I think what a lot of people on process work and system integration, what you're really doing is you're changing habits of a lot of longtime folks who have a track record of being successful with their old habits.
Yeah.
Okay. So if
Yep.
you're not, again, this is one of those situations where it's really important to focus on the context. So
Yep.
that's what a CRM implementation is. It's a concerted effort to change and improve habits of people who are not even aware and or really would rather not change habits,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so you better be changing the habits to a process that you're confident is going to get them immediately better results. Or the natural fear of adoption we have when confronted with something like a process initiative or a CRM implementation will just get worse every day. And I have seen in my 17-year career as an EOS implementer, a lot of change initiatives fail specifically because the proponents of those initiatives underestimated the amount of non-intentional pushback they were going to get from their people
Mm.
around habit change.
It is the single biggest contributor, again, depending on which way you look at it. So one of the biggest reasons that implementations of any technology aren't successful is because they aren't adopted. And the reason that they aren't adopted is because the change management and the training and but most importantly, explaining to people why we're doing this and how their lives and our business is going to be better because of it was often missing, right?
Yeah, well, one of my favorite analogies is having a treadmill in your basement doesn't fix anything. Using the treadmill in your basement does.
Yes. Yeah.
So you decide.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually I'm in a group that talks a lot about capability. And within capability, you have ability and you have other things, but we use that analogy as well, whether it's a treadmill or a piano. So, if you have a piano or a treadmill, you have the capability to do something with it. The question is, do you have the ability and actually, or are you going to do something with it?
To use the tool.
To
To
use it.
use the tool. That's
Yeah.
right.
Mike, so I have two more questions after this one, which is, you said earlier, which I completely agree with, when you were talking about like the three biggest areas of struggle that you see, that you do see and you've seen throughout your 17 years. The third one around sort of the knowledge of knowing what got you here isn't going to get you to where you're going, which again, I think I agree. And I'm sure most people listening get that at an intellectual level, at least. But do you ever see the flip side of that where you have people say, "Oh, well, we tried that last year or 2 years ago and it didn't work, so we don't think it's going to work now." It's kind of a flip side of that same
Yeah.
thing.
The flavor of the month condition is we were dealing with this problem. We tried this, and this for 2 weeks each. None of those fixed it in 2 weeks. So we're
They probably
just
they
going to
probably
be
will never
stuck
work.
with this problem for the rest of our careers.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see that a lot.
yeah,
I see that a lot. And one of the things we encourage when we're implementing EOS and solving issues, facilitating the solving of issues with our leadership teams, is we encourage leadership teams to take a shot. Like, failing fast is a superpower. If you're stuck and there are three things you could do, there's also a fourth option. You could do none of them. Okay? The problem is, if you choose the none of them option, 90 days from now, or whenever you're talking about this problem again, and it's usually about 90 days, you're still going to be stuck with the same three options. Whereas if you tried one of them and you were wrong, you would have eliminated one of your two, and you could go to attempt number two to solve the problem.
right.
And so that's part of the psychology of working with somebody who does this facilitation work all the time is, obviously you have to weigh the potential negative impacts of making mistakes and so on and so forth. There are some mistakes you should experiment with and try, and others that you shouldn't. But man, I just think if teams would move themselves forward just a little bit faster and do what they think is going to solve the problem without worrying or waiting until they're sure they're going to be right,
Yeah,
a lot of things would change for the better.
yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. So, Mike, as we sort of start wrapping up here, for the leaders listening who feel their business is running them instead of the other way around, asking for a friend, what is the first step you recommend in taking back control?
Yeah. So the first step is realizing that this is not your lot in life. You are the architect of your own future. Okay. I talk to so many people who just think if you've decided to run your own company, you're going to be overwhelmed and your family's going to resent you for the rest of your life. And it doesn't matter whether you're young or old, male or female, tall or short. That is a true statement. So please don't give up on the idea that you can run a great business and live a great life at the same time, as step one. And then step two is find a system like EOS that helps you assemble the right leadership team, create the right set of priorities, get everybody on the same page with what you're trying to accomplish, and may start gradually getting you out of the day-to-day, the weeds, the mess cleanups, the frustrating conversations with people who don't seem to ever get it.
Uh,
Find something that will help you wiggle your way out of that muck you're in and get to the place where you deserve to be.
yeah, love that. Really, really good, Mike. And then to wrap up, assuming I don't think of anything else next. So, looking ahead, what excites you most about the future of, I think entrepreneurship in general, but then maybe also EOS?
Yeah, I think that I've become more and more clear that the thing that is going to make a big difference in this country, and I think around the globe, isn't big governments and big corporations. It's good, hardworking people who have an idea or a passion for something and are willing to do the hard work of assembling a great team of people that they take great care of and want to serve their customers well. I mean, I think entrepreneurship is going to become more and more important in the future of the world, that access to things like technology and AI and systems and infrastructure and knowledge is expanding at such an exponential rate that it's actually going to even the playing field with the big players that used to kind of dominate all of that stuff. So that's what excites me. And as far as EOS goes, I mean, we've just gone through a bit of a change or transition in our organization that the new leadership team is calling back to the basics, where we're getting back to focusing on, attracting and supporting the world's greatest business coaches and facilitators,
Mhm.
professional EOS implementers. We've got 850 of us around the world that are doing this work, and we're adding more every quarter. And we've gotten back to just helping people understand how to purely implement EOS in their business with or without the aid of a professional EOS implementer. And I think that focus is going to really serve the organization, our community of implementers, and the end users of EOS really, really.
Really good, Mike. I just, as you were talking about that, so I know that sort of, at least in the sort of 11 years that we've been doing EOS, the sort of the language is great for companies of between 10 and 150 people. Would you say that's still true today? Even though, I mean, I know that there are companies that are far greater than 250 that still run on EOS.
Yeah,
How do you answer that question?
it's another subject on which the context is really important. So we call a privately held entrepreneurial company with between 10 and 250 people our target market, which means
Hmm.
it's just a target rich environment, right? If we're
Yeah,
fishing in a pond with lots of those types of organizations in them, we're going to find a lot of leaders and leadership team members who are intrigued by and excited about something like EOS, because that is the sweet spot where you start realizing you need some kind of structure, discipline, accountability, clarity, execution juice, whatever you want to call it.
uh,
But you don't want to ruin the entrepreneurial spirit of the company that gets you excited every day, right?
right. Yeah,
And so, but that doesn't mean EOS only works in companies like those. I've got some clients that are smaller. I've got several clients that are much larger, including Bridgewater, although they did start with me when they were about that size. And so what I say today is, if the people who own and run the company and who are ultimately accountable for the most important decisions that need to be made in that organization every day, doesn't matter the size, scope, or shape. If they want a business to run on EOS, EOS is going to be an effective mechanism for running a business of any size. If they don't care or they don't want the company running on EOS, doesn't care how big or small you are, it's not going to be a great fit.
sure.
And so
Yeah,
what I tell everybody who's exploring EOS is, read traction, visit the website, download some free tools, learn enough about EOS, but call a local EOS implementer and have one of us come in and do a 90-minute meeting for your leadership team, so you get a clear sense of what a company running on EOS is. And then you'll know, do we want to run our business this way? And if you do, it's likely to work. And if you don't, go to plan B.
right.
That's kind of the way I would approach it, regardless of how big or small your company is.
That's awesome. I think that's going to be really useful. Mike Paton, thank you so much for joining me today. It was awesome to catch up, and you've shared some really valuable lessons that I'm going to be digging into myself, and I'm sure a lot of the other folks listening are going to be doing the same. Thanks again.
Appreciate the good work you're doing, Brendon, you and your team at Dynamico. It's really important that entrepreneurial companies exercise rigor and discipline about growing their businesses, because if you're not creating a splash in the marketplace, you have the best people waiting around to do a lot of work. Ain't going to get you anywhere you want to go. So keep it up, please.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.